throughout the course of the day, you've had glimpses at the picture of the elephant, and this is the elephant in the room. We have been talking about privacy, data security, data protection, and regulation all day, and now we are going to be talking about the DPDP Act specifically, and how GCCs can be affected with the onset of the new data protection regulations in India. Now, before I get into the discussion, let me introduce our lovely panelists here. So joining me today is Srikanth Srinivasan. He's the Vice President and Head Membership, GCC, BPM, and SME at NASSCOM. Very well-known face in the tech industry. Now, in addition to his designation at NASSCOM, Srikanth also heads the National Industry Councils of GCC, BPM, and SME. He's a regular speaker at various industry forums and institutions and has been on the TEDx platform twice. And our second speaker here is Sheenam Ordi. She's Managing Director at Broadridge, India. Now, Sheenam is responsible for the product management and engineering and operations and innovation, pretty much everything Broadridge does for its India-based centers. Now, she joined the company in 2021 as Chief Operating Officer in India. And prior to that, she worked in Dell and was the APJ CIO leader. So great having you with us, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. And like we promised, we're going to open it up for a couple of questions towards the end, so you can have a candid chat session with our experts here as well. Now, to start with, let's look at some of the aspects of DPDP Act 2023 that are most relevant to GCCs. Now, I'll start with you, Srikanth. You must remember that as soon as DPDP went live, a lot of industry leaders, especially from the growing sectors, fintech, they kind of expressed a little bit of pushback because it's going to hamper agility, it's going to hamper innovation. Agility and innovation are the lifeblood of GCCs. Yeah. How do you think DPDP is going to impact GCC business? Is it going to stifle innovation as we fear?
Thank you, Soumik. First of all, thank you for having me here. And see, I think the DPDP Act, I think it's important to understand the use case of the DPDP Act, right? It's pertinent to understand that GCCs, largely their business is not in India. They are working with end customers who are outside the country. They are working for an organization, technically they are a subsidiary in India, and hence they're working for an organization that's outside the country. They're working on data which is outside the country. So in all sense, that has nothing to do with the data. It's just being probably processed within India. And hence, the specific use case of the DPD Act is very, very different from what it is for the general enterprise. So we have to look at it from the business case point of view. And hence, obviously, it's very right that many of them said, this does not apply to us, etc., and it's very rightful. Thank you.
Right. Sheenam, your take on this. Should GCCs be looking at India's data protection laws any differently than a regular Indian enterprise?
So I would say yes and no. Yes, because the fact that what Srikanth said, we process data which is sitting outside of India. We don't do business in India. So our client information really is not there. No, why? Because we have associate data, and their data is as important and needs to be governed by the DPDP Act. So therefore, the right consents have to be there. We share that data globally. What can we share? What's the PII around that is also important. So I think it has to be a balance depending on what kind of data we are processing. Most times we are logging into a system and doing the processing in that data center, right? Our data center strategies are governed by global such acts. So that's what I would say.
All right, thank you for that. Now, Srikanth, taking off on the point that Sheenam just mentioned out here, and that is pertaining to the fact that GCCs, you look at a lot of operations that are based for businesses outside of India. So you have, in addition to the DPDP, you could also have other acts like GDPR, etc., coming into the picture. So from a compliance standpoint, what are some of the security and the regulatory challenges that you foresee for GCCs?
See, technically, I don't see any great challenge in terms of security and compliance, because I think whatever they need to comply, each and every GCC would be complying to the respective norms of of the countries that they are part of, right? Or the data they are processing on. From an India standpoint, I think the one thing that probably may be pertinent in the current scenario is all about the whole safe harbor piece, where I think it's also been called out in the budget very recently about the whole transfer pricing challenges that I think most GCCs or practically every GCC is undergoing today, right? I mean, that's something that needs to be probably kind of, corrected or, modified to suit them, because currently, I mean, there are multiple challenges here. Whether you call it the safe harbor regime, the percentage of taxation that's put there, or whether it's the APAs, which take, I don't know how long, but 4 or 5 years and more, and pending for even more
Sometimes after the period, it gets
after
settled
the
after the
is
period.
over. And last but not the least is the regular assessment. In most cases, the regular assessment after any a little bit of whatever arbitration that's done actually sometimes turns out to be even cheaper than the safe harbor tax. So because the safe harbor tax is technically, I think it's about 70 to 24%. That's the range. But many times after the arbitration, the regular assessment lands in the region of 13 to 14, 13 and a half to 15%. So I think that's something that we are also talking as NASCOM, the industry is talking.
I need to find your arbitrator.
So I think that's where the whole challenge is. I think that's a risk. I mean, that's a challenge that GCCs need to contend with. And I think now I think the government is also looking at it in a very fairly positive way and has called out wanting to kind of streamline this process. We do hope that will come very soon, because the number of slabs are too many. It probably needs to become a single slab, or at best two, because a lot of kind of work. Somebody is doing services, somebody is doing BPO, somebody is doing engineering, somebody is doing R&D. You can't, and it's the same organization. You can't have a China wall between each kind of work, right? I mean, they're all merged together. So that modification, that transformation has to happen.
Shinam, your views on that same point?
So from a GCC point of view, I think he's absolutely right? There's nothing special about a GCC. But from a Broadridge perspective, right, we are a highly regulated business. In a Broadridge platform, 10 trillion worth of transactions flow through a Broadridge platform every day. Wow. Understanding, appreciating, and ensuring that we have the necessary data governance in place is very, very important. Right? So regulatory and legal frameworks across everything that exists in the world. So whether it's a Japan regulation or the California Act or GDPR or DPDP, we have to know and be compliant with all of them. We have to ensure that regulations are there. I think one complexity that exists for GCCs is the fact that we also work with third-party vendors. And that governance becomes very important when we interact. So in addition to the transfer pricing piece, locally, I think one of the things that we have to focus on is the third-party interactions and how we sign our contracts and how we do our audits on them when they're working with us.
Great point there. Shrikant, would you want to add on to that? Because we saw last year there was a major, banking data breach, and which resulted from a third-party, cloud service provider. What do GCCs have to keep in mind if they want to plug these third-party vulnerabilities or weak points?
See, in as much as I think, first of all, I think GCCs, the kind of investments that they're doing in terms of ensuring that the overall infrastructure that they operate in the country is fairly robust, trustworthy. I mean, those are the things, right? I mean, if you just step back and see how has this industry been. This tech industry in India is about 38, 39 years old. And it's been built on the bedrock of foundation of primarily trust, right? Data, the trust that the data that comes to you is safe wherever it is from. So I think that's largely the premise. And I think from a GCC standpoint, I think they are definitely, each GCC is today building that robust infrastructure around it. Cybersecurity is definitely one of them. So that's something that they're building around, and each organization takes its own kind of path in how are they kind of, if I can use the word, ring fencing themselves in terms of data. It could be the GCC entity within the country, or like Shinam said, the service provider entity also may be within the entity, country or outside. But either way, right? Both ways. But I think that's something that you're strengthening. The infra is being strengthened, and obviously using the latest technologies and so on.
Right. Now, for the next question, Shinam, we want to draw from your experience at Broadridge. Now, like you said, Broadridge processes trillions of dollars of transactions. There may be a lot of significant data fiduciaries in our audience members here as well. Now, Broadridge has emphasized, they've kind of underlined this entire principle on the need for balance.
Yeah.
So, how do you think GCCs can play this balancing act between innovation, agility, and data compliance?
Great question. I'm going to draw from my engineering experience and what we are also doing at Broadridge. One of the things that we've done from a pure play engineering perspective is build all of this into our DevOps pipeline, right? So we use Jenkins and GitLab, and it's not just to check whether you're checking in the right kind of code from a syntax perspective and all others, but every single non-functional requirement, how does that get built into it, is there. So security as code, infrastructure as code, all of that, if you are able to integrate that into your DevOps pipeline, whatever tool that you use, I think that's very, very important. What that does is that it ensures that even if the developer makes a mistake, okay, it gets caught and it's not released into production anyhow, right? The other thing that you have to do as an organization is really on the culture piece, right? How do you ensure that the engineers understand the non-functional requirements as much as they understand the requirements? How do you ensure that the product owners are building into the stories the definition of good, including NFRs, as we call it, and really incorporating NFRs as a mindset into the entire system is something that's very, very critical for everybody to work around, specifically for this.
All right, thank you. You've partnered with a lot of organizations. Would you want to also add on to Shinam's point on how can these organizations be able to play this balancing act in a better manner?
Okay, if you want to kind of rephrase it, when you say balancing act, how are you? What exactly do you?
How can they? How can they?
How can you do
ensure
innovation while you
without
protect?
compromising on security or data protection?
Okay. Okay. So I think, see, this is a very, just two sides of the same coin, right? I mean, you need to balance it well. But I think we might need to step back and see from a GCC standpoint, again, go back, right? It's always built, why are they here in India, right? I mean, what is the foundational reason for their presence in India? I think largely it has been, one, the talent, the second is the technology adoption, and third is the innovation. These are the reasons why they are here. Now, we cannot and should not restrict that need with things like, are you secure, etc. I think security, etc. will definitely get built in. As an organization, irrespective of which data you're working on, you want security, you will build security, you will ensure it is followed, right? I mean, I think that's a very, I mean, it's like you're never going to leave your house without locking the house, right? I mean, it's your primary responsibility. You're never going to leave it open and go away. So I think that much of trust needs to be built in, because without compromising. Today, when you look at an act like this or any of these things, right? These acts are not there to deter you from doing something. They are enablers for you to do certain things. They are not there to, they are not functioning as a lock, they are not functioning as a speed breaker, but they are functioning more like probably a better highway or a faster highway or a smoother highway for you to go through this. And I think we do see a lot of organizations doing this. And again, when we're saying all of this innovation and things like that, I think people are also using it in the area of cybersecurity. Today, for one single data point, I think about 89% of the GCCs today have their CISOs present. I mean, the GCC entity has a CISO present there, and these CISOs have a say or a seat on the table or a voice on the table in the global cybersecurity decision making of the organization. That actually goes to say the kind of reach that the cybersecurity wing in the GCC has in the overall enterprise.
Great. And with that, we would also want to know a little bit more about NASSCOM's vision for GCC empowered global cybersecurity delivery. Now, we are looking at global. We've heard about research delivery, innovation delivery, cybersecurity delivery. How do you see NASSCOM's role coming in there?
See, I think there are two things here. One, I think as NASSCOM, we are definitely working with multiple organizations in seeing how it can be enabled. One, and all of you know that NASSCOM also has another sister organization called the Data Security Council of India, which works very closely with the government in terms of policy making, ease of doing business, and also enabling the overall ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem. And I'm saying innovation ecosystem, innovation need not be always in-house within the organization. Many more often than not in a GCC world, it's co-innovation, it's co-creation. Many GCCs today actually work with the startup world to co-create because the agility of a startup organization is far higher. So that those are the things that we are doing to ensuring that you can quickly work with the younger organizations, etc., to see how we can probably find solutions to some of the problem statements that we have, and make it bring it, speed to market can be improved. That's one thing that we're doing. The second, I think, and I think no discussion on any of these things goes without talking about skill. I think skill development plays a huge role, because this is not an area where you have unlimited supply of people, right? I mean, it's always a short supply, and I think as we speak, even for the next 5 years, 10 years, we're going to have short supply of people in cybersecurity.
Correct.
So how do we kind of work around this? I think a lot of work is going on in this space, and I will probably not elaborate here, but I think work is going on both at the organic level, where we are talking to colleges, bringing the industry academia connect to ensure that skill pipeline is built. And the second piece is inorganic, where each organization is also working with their own internal people to kind of build them up the value chain to do more. Both of it.
Right. Now, for folks listening out there, NASSCOM has tied up with KPMG and the Data Security Council of India. They've done some really impressive stuff when it comes to cybersecurity guidelines. You might want to give it a read. I found that immensely helpful. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is, again, the speed of innovation and this entire concept of security as a business enabler. Now, Shinam, now, most of the businesses in India, let's say the fastest growing sectors are, of course, the fintech sectors. And what they sell by is a 2-minute mein loan or a loan in 4 clicks. Okay, but then we don't really have security selling as a business enabler. How do you view that? Do you think GCCs can enable organizations to start, delivering cybersecurity also as a business enabler?
So it depends on what business I am. In a business like ours, right, establishing trust, and going back to what Shrikant also said, is really, really important, right? So you establish trust, you expand that trust, and then you monetize the trust, right? And that's, I think, in that segment is where what you're talking about comes in. You don't really, in my opinion, ever sell cybersecurity. You sell a product which inspires trust. So there is an underlying component which says, yes, you're doing the right thing, okay? You are building the right models if you're doing an AI product, and you are, you're taking care of data governance, you're ensuring that nothing that the customer does not want to be seen is done. You're taking care of data masking, you're taking care of encryption, you're taking care of security at various points. You're taking care of access controls, identity management, all of that at various controls. That's what is really important. Now, one breach, and you're going to lose, in a business like us, lose a lot of customers, right? We're known, Broadridge's tagline has been accurate, dependable, reliable. Today it is trusted, right? And transformative, but trusted is really, really important. So to monetize trust, first, I think it's important to establish and expand, but nobody is really, in my opinion, going to buy trust from you unless and until you are a services company. Yeah.
But then I think I just love what you just said there. You cannot monetize cybersecurity, but trust, yes, of course you can do that. Shrikant, I would want to hear your views as well. I know NASSCOM is also looking at compliance or security as a strategic enabler. Tell us NASSCOM's vision on this particular topic.
See, I think to the point that Sheena made, right? I mean, when you're doing, I mean, from a GCC standpoint, I think trust is a given thing, right? I mean, you don't go and sell a product saying my product is trustworthy. A customer comes to you fully assuming that your product is trustworthy. I mean, that's it's not a compromise point, right? I mean, you can't, nobody compromises here. So I think we're, from a NASCOM point of view, I think we are only trying to build the overall importance, keenness, etc., on the compliance piece. And again, wherever relevant, because everything that we are doing, everything that we're talking here in the current scenario, especially given the topic of discussion today or DPDP, I think everything we need not come, everything is not relevant in the current scenario, but whatever is relevant in the current scenario is something that we need to do. But more importantly, what we are also doing today as NASCOM is to talking to both sides. One is the government, which has made the draft rules and so on and so forth. Second is the industry, which is the user, and trying to see where the right match is. Because see, as I said earlier, it has to be an enabler. It cannot be a stumbling block. It cannot be a showstopper. So I think that's something that we are trying to do, trying to bring both sides together to ensure that eventually ease of using it, ease of complying with it will be far easier than what one would like it to be, right? I mean, eventually, I mean, you cannot have a very complicated process to follow and so on. I mean, going back to the example of safe harbor, today we find it difficult. This should not be yet another. It should be easy. That's where we are trying to. And as we speak, I think the government is doing a few industry consultations. There's one today going on in the city, or probably ended now, one happening later in the week, and so on. They're trying to do this. Even the government is trying to do multiple consultations in the industry to ensure that people can easily adopt to this.
Right. And to your point again, I love this little bit of competition going on between Hyderabad and Bangalore trying to establish as the GCC capital in India. That's going to be really interesting to watch out for in the next 2 to 3 years.
As long as the money is flowing in the country.
Exactly.
There you go. That's Broadridge's way of looking at it. Now, Sheenam, let's really get into the meat and potatoes of it. Now, which security tools and technologies do you think are critical to GCC operations? We have seen a whole host of them over the last few years. Which ones are you specifically looking at?
For this one, I'm going to read, right?
Sure,
Because
sure.
you're asking me for tool names. I think at the start, it's very important for us to be clear about how we manage our data. So data masking and data minimalization is something that is, very, very basic and the horizontal of the pyramid, right? The base of the pyramid. We start from there, and data masking, data minimalization, we do on our own. We don't use external tools. The next level is really encryption, ensuring that data that is passing through any kind of channel is encrypted. We use BitLocker for our laptops, ensuring that any kind of data that is sent out is encrypted. It's very, very clear. We are a finance, very, very strongly regulated finance company. So in our laptops, there are no hard, you cannot have an external drive. All of those are really disabled. For DLP, we use semantic. Very, very important. DLP is really important for us. For storing of passwords, API keys, and stuff like that, we are using HashiCorp secret management solutions. For identity management, for access and stuff like that, we use Broadcom solution, and we use the CA privileged access manager. So those are the kind of tools that we're using.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Now, coming to the last question and last topic that I wanted to discuss with you people, and Srikanth, I'll be starting with you for this. Srikanth, I mean, if you remember, just a week after DeepSeek was launched, after it kind of shook the entire world, shook the stock market, sent NVIDIA into a nosedive, the week after that, Wired released an article saying that 50 security researchers threw basic security tests at DeepSeek, and DeepSeek kind of failed every one of them. Now, a lot of tech people out here, a lot of IT leaders, they're trying out these new LLMs, they're trying out these new Gen AI tools. Now, in the absence of any kind of security guardrails, what would you advise these folks? How do you go about adoption of LLMs or, let's say, a Gen AI tool?
I I think guardrails, I mean, I'm not saying we should not have, we should definitely have guardrails. I think that's something that I don't think anybody is saying we should not have guardrails, but I think the guardrails should not be an impediment to usage and progress. So that's where I think cybersecurity becomes very, very critical. That's one. Again, going back to the point, I think it's all about when you're using AI, Gen AI, it is also, why are we using this, right? It's about productivity. It is about making things more sustainable. It's making things more. But again, at the same time, when you want to do all of this, you also have to ensure that the right amount of responsibility and trust is built in. Yeah. Today, I think if to go to your point, if I have to simply put it in a very common man's parlance, I think I would call this as one being very responsible, first of all, right? That's very critical, especially, I mean, I would call it, responsibility in the digital world becomes very critical. I mean, you cannot just go and play with anything just like that, right? I mean, that's very important. Yeah, I mean, cases like this will keep coming and going. We don't know how many more such examples will come in the next few weeks, months, or as we speak, something could be out there. Don't even know. I think that's very important. So guardrails will continue to be built. Guardrails will continue to exist, in my view, but not with the intent of stopping or impediment of work, but with the aim to keep things secure but continue innovation.
Right. Little twist to your question there, Shinam. You've worked as a CTO as well. Now, from first-hand experience, when unrolled BYOD, we saw this threat of shadow IT, shadow devices. Then we opened up to APIs and we saw shadow APIs coming in. Now with people trying out AI and Gen AI tools, you see the threat of shadow AI also coming in, and how can our organizations address it?
In the world of technology, everything is possible, right? Technology can build anything. What you want to build is the possibilities. The possibilities are endless, right? Now you want to do positive building or negative building, that's left to you. We have had hackers who have hacked a system. When I was in SAP, I still remember this. They would sell what they have hacked, right? So it depends on whether you are, again, somebody who wants to do it to make money or somebody who wants to create destruction. From our point of view at Broadridge, I think explainability, transparency, no bias in a model is really, really important. So we have been the front runners in our industry to generate Gen AI products, right? We are able to showcase to our customers what and how we build our models, how we're going to use the data. We're able to showcase very, very clearly that their data will not enter the public domain. So we have those guardrails kind of built in, right? Because without those guardrails, nobody's going to use those products for us. So building that into the engineering in a way that is very easily consumed is going to be really important.
Lovely to hear that.
Yeah.
All right.
One last point from an engineering perspective that I would want to leave with people is that anything that you build will fail. So when you build something specifically in the Gen AI space and people don't think about it, I think it's very important to have a way, a plan to manage an incident or something that happens. That's really, really critical for you to know and have before you kind of release something into the market.
Thank you for that. Srikanth, your parting 2 cents for our audience here.
I think I would call this as I think any of these things, right? Any challenges that happen comes only because of lack of digital discipline. So I think that's one. And cyber hygiene. These are 2 things I think which is what kind of skips, and that's where many of these incidents happen. If people can stick to these 2, I guess largely we are covered, we are safer.
Right. So essentially it boils down to stick to the basics, get the basics right, and do not be afraid to experiment or try out new things. Yeah. All right, with that, folks, we're going to open it up for a couple of questions. We have the gentleman in the check shirt here. Go ahead, please. We'll pass you a mic. Just give me 1 second so we can, everyone here can hear your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a great conversation, great insights as well. Thanks to both the leads over here. Shinam, one question is, especially with respect to third-party vendors, whenever they were sharing the data, through the documents, if they were sharing some PCI data or PII data, which are zipped or something, some, if it is a relational tables or something, Excels or some other formats, you can apply all these things. But if it is coming as an embedded things, and then, how you are ensuring that the data protection mechanism has been taken care, when especially dealing with the third party vendors.
So if you're dealing with physical documents or you're dealing with soft copy documents?
Soft copy documents.
So in soft copies, you should definitely be seeing how you can mask the data, right? Now, if that's data that you need to access, then comes into the picture as to how you protect the access to that data. Who needs to have the access, and is that access something that is regulated? Because if let's assume your third party vendor, and your third party vendor is an HR vendor, and they're providing, let's say, background information, right? You need to have that information. But how many people need to see that information before it goes into your HRMS system and stays there in an encrypted fashion is something that you have to figure out. A, can you automate that pipeline? B, if you cannot at this point of time automate that pipeline, there has to be some kind of an access management automated system for that.
Entitlements.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your name, sir?
Manjunath Jangama from JP Morgan Chase.
Manjunath, thank you so much for the question. It was a great question. I might have just time to squeeze in one more question here. The gentleman in the shirt back there. Can we pass the mic to him, please?
So this is a question to Srikanth. I'm Kiran. I represent Dallas Venture Capital, a cross-border VC which invests in enterprise software startups. So you mentioned about working along with startups in India. In Srikanth, in your experience, how many GCCs are able to engage with the startups over here and take decisions over here, particularly when they work with the infra layer? And is there any particular sector which has adopted and started working with startups much more than any other sector in the GCC segment?
Okay, sure, Kiran. So I don't have the exact number here, but I definitely can call out some examples of GCCs having worked with startups. In fact, you're right. I think, are they taking decisions in India? That becomes very critical. I think an initiative of this nature needs to come from the top. It has to be an organizational intent. It has to be an enterprise intent to do something like this. While I can't take the names of organizations, I definitely know, I can give you examples of both in the BFSI space and the retail CPG space where people have had reasonable success. Today, to the extent that some organizations even have a small kind of an accelerator for the identified startups to work in-house to kind of, fine-tune the solution and take it to market. There are good examples of that.
Kiran, we have done that in the past. We've mentored about 18 startups and had an accelerator program for about 6 of them. So the way, Srikanth mentioned that earlier, the way GCCs want to approach this is to see if they can get some innovation at scale, at speed, not scale. Scale will come through the GCC, but at speed to figure out if there's something that, is worth investing in. So there's a lot of us who's actually doing that, in my opinion.
All right, folks, we'll have to close the discussion. Thank you again, Srikanth and Shinam. It was great talking to you.
Thank you very much.